Horrorfest lineup of all time, going on right now until Halloween. You will not remember what I show you now. Yet I shall awaken memories of love and crime and death. What is up, everybody? Welcome to PCP Movie Night. Welcome as we kick off the final week of Horrorfest 2024. That's right. It's been a long road to get here. It's been a long journey traveling through Horrorfest. And now we are kicking off the end. 12 movies talked about this entire week. So super excited to kick it off with a Universal Monster classic, The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff, directed by Karl Freund. And we, of course, have to have a great panel to kick off a great movie discussion. And we're going to kick that panel off with Nick from Comic Culture. First Horrorfest appearance.
Yeah, this year. And you know, it has to be a Universal Monster flick in order to get me on the panel, dude. How you doing, man?
That's right, man. And remember, Invisible Man was March Madness, so not technically Horrorfest. So this is your first Horrorfest show, man.
Okay. There we go.
March Madness is like the little kid's sister. You know what I'm saying? And
right,
Horrorfest is the big brother, I guess, right? But
glad to be here either way, man.
Heck yeah, man. Also, when we talk about classic Universal monsters, this dude always likes to show up. It's Joe Corallo. What is up, my man?
It's true. Not much right now other than this, but last night I went out to a screening of Wes Craven's New Nightmare over at Alamo Draft House. That was fun.
Cool. Oh, that does sound fun.
Yeah.
That's an interesting movie. That's one of those ones I used to always be like, this is one of the best movies like in the whole Nightmare franchise. And then occasionally, like every third or fourth watch, I go, this one's pretty bad. But then the next time I watch it, I always love it. It's one of those ones that's bad every third time I see it. It's weird.
Yeah, no, it's in my top half of Nightmare movies for sure. But
yeah, that's high quality that throughout the franchise. Speaking of high quality throughout the franchise, and of course, worse every third time I see him. It's Brooks. What's up, my man?
So,
how you doing, man? You excited to be here?
Oh yeah, man.
This is one you have seen, right? This is one you've seen.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure everybody here has seen it except for maybe Nick. Nick, was this your first time?
I saw pieces of it when I was a kid, but I don't think I ever sat through it all the way as like an adult for sure. So nice. It might as well have been the first time. So
and I'm sure that Joe saw it in the Egyptian theater, like in some special screening or something like that.
I've seen it before.
I've seen it before. So we're talking about The Mummy. This is the Universal Monsters Mummy Legacy Collection, which is also part. You can buy this individually. You can also buy it as part of the entire Universal Monsters franchise, which is available like 30 plus films in one box set. Got it for a great price at a link in the description below. If you haven't treated yourself to that, you deserve it because it's all the Mummy films, all the Frankenstein films, all the Draculas, the Wolfmans, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Invisible Man, all that stuff, including the Abbott and Costello bits. So, for instance, this movie, this set right here has the Mummy, Mummy's Hand, Mummy's Tomb, Mummy's Ghost, Mummy's Curse, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. But we're talking about the one that kicked it all off in 1932, The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff. It made total sense for them to make this movie for three reasons. Universal was riding a string of success with Dracula and Frankenstein and even the Old Dark House. Like they were building this whole idea and legacy very early on for horror films, right? And don't forget, they had already done Hunchback of Notre Dame and why am I blanking? Phantom of the Opera, right? Like really kind of putting them to be known as the House of Horror for decades to come. And then with the success of Dracula, with the success of Frankenstein, it made sense to do another movie and to utilize the star of Frankenstein, which was Boris Karloff, really coming up into his own, the brilliant makeup effects of Jack Pierce. And then with the Dracula success, why don't we just copycat this whole screenplay, bring in that screenplay writer to do that, and also get the director of photography of Dracula, Karl Freund, who's bringing this expressionistic view and cinematography in. Let's let him direct his first movie. And that's how we get The Mummy. And also, the tomb of Tutankhamun had just been discovered. This was sensational. It was a big deal. Everything started becoming Egyptian themed, and there was a big spur of interest in Egyptology and the mythology behind ancient Egypt. So this was just a perfect movie to make. Now, it wasn't quite as successful as Dracula or Frankenstein, but it was very successful, and it has continued on throughout the ages, spawning many imitations, many remakes. The Stephen Sommers film that we were talking about a little bit behind stage, which opened up my eyes to the fact that men and women are hot, right? So I really love this movie. The first time I watched this movie, I was super excited to see it, but I was disappointed. And my disappointment was that Boris Karloff wasn't in the mummy bandages the entire time. Like, that was the thing I remember as a kid. I think Nick said something about this too, and maybe in a poster, in a back chat or something. But
or you just read my mind, one or the other. Either way.
But that's usually what happens with most kids. And most people say, oh, that mummy movie is boring, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other mummy movies that Universal did in the 40s, they're more like that. It's Karis, and he's running around shambling like that. But this movie, when I watched, there was something about it in high school in particular that clicked with me, right? That just really worked. This is I really like these dark figures that are totally disturbed by their feelings of love and unfulfilled love and stuff like that, right? I used to love that, Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, I don't know, a slightly romantic tinge to it, more than just for revenge or something like that. Boris Karloff is amazing. Imhotep, the way he's portraying him in this film, he's a sorcerer, right? And that's what I loved about the Stephen Sommers film, is that they went back into that, where they show a little bit more of the progression where he becomes the normal guy. But I freaking love this movie. I think it is beautifully shot. I think every single performer is amazing in the film. I think the makeup effects are brilliant. And luckily for Boris Karloff, they didn't spend too much time with him in the mummy bandages, because that was a process that started at 7 or I think 7 a.m., ended at 7 p.m., and then he would film till 2 a.m., and then it would take 2 more hours to take it off or whatever. It was an all-day process, very grueling, very hard, just like all the makeup was back in these days. I freaking love this movie. I think it's brilliant. I wrote my own story called The Coffin Master that was basically a ripoff of The Mummy, right? Where I just came up with different names for these things. But I'm obsessed with this film. I think it's brilliant. I think it's one of the underappreciated Universal monster movies, right? Because it is just kind of like a copy paste of Dracula, but I think it does a little bit more cinematography, cinematically, I guess I should say. And I think it really elevates Boris Karloff, because, you don't really get to see him do much in Old Dark House or in Frankenstein as far as vocally performing. And here you get that voice, you get that deliberate pace to his performance that really just sets the scene for his career. Nick, what do you think overall about The Mummy? Go out there in the chat. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I like I said, I haven't really watched it since I was a kid, and so this is the first adult, screening of the film, and I have to agree with everything you said. There's ups and downs for me, right? So I wanted like the Mummy. It's Universal monster. I had this expectation going in. There's got to be a little bit of a body count. You know what I mean? It's a classic horror film, so like there's not really a whole lot of body count inside this, right? And when there is a body count. It's more of people just getting in his way, right? He's trying to fulfill that love, that eternal love that he's had. And there's some people that get in his way, and so that's the only people we're taking out. We're not a maniacal, brainless monster, right? We're trying to fulfill some kind of a goal here, and so that's that romantic element that you said about Dracula. You know, people just kind of happen to get in the way. He's trying to survive and whatnot, and there's some casualties along the way. So I loved the how close the most recent Mummy franchise movie, like the 99 one, followed this one. It took a lot of the scenes directly from it. The overall story is exactly the same, and I loved those franchises growing up as well. So I was really pleased to see basically that same story obviously being remade back in the 32 version is there. So I really enjoyed that. Boris Karloff was amazing. Those close-up shots where he's just staring at you were incredible. You talked about the makeup, the lighting effect on that too. You can kind of see the reflection of like the not maybe the crew, but the lighting especially. And I was like pausing it, trying to see if I can see anything in there. But I dug the overall story. I like the execution. A lot of cool scenery changes too. There's different scenes, whether it's you're inside the house or you're at a dig site or you're at the museum or wherever, you know what I mean? So it wasn't just sitting in one room the entire time or one or two rooms. So the scenery changed, and that was really interesting. The overall performances were great. There wasn't a whole lot of characters, but a lot of different people got some good screen time. So it wasn't like we're following one person or two people. We had a small cast. We got to see a lot of every one of them, which is interesting. And that was pretty cool to see that. But I don't think it scratched like that itch that I had for like a horror film, although it's the 1930s. But we saw Invisible Man recently, and that body count was in the hundreds or whatever it was. And so I kind of had that in my mind going into this movie as well. And I'm like, oh, it's not that kind of movie. So we got to be careful about that. So I think it met a lot of my expectations, but yes, I would like to see some more mummies. The subsequent films that are coming out that we talked about that you mentioned on that box set, those are completely different movies, but I do love the romance story in this one and how it was executed. And Boris Karloff was just amazing in it. So I think it did a lot of great things. And then it did some things that maybe a modern audience, you know, looking back now would kind of say, well, it was kind of cheesy or whatever, but I think it was good and I enjoyed it overall.
I also think there are elements of this movie, in particular, like the way that they're kind of portraying this like love story and like Imhotep in a sympathetic light, but also in a evil light, and playing nuance with that character, and the way that the lighting is and the camera movement, and especially considering what camera movement and cameras like in American Hollywood cinema in 1930s, the early 30s was like. I think people would call this thing elevated today. Personally, that's just what I'm saying, but I don't know. But I really like your thoughts, Nick, man. You're pretty spot on the money there. Joe, what do you think about The Mummy? A lot of Universal monsters out there. How does this one stack up?
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible. It's while it is doing a lot of what Dracula already did, it is doing it in a way like the character of Helen / Inoxinamun like is a stronger female lead than movies for several decades to come. She has her own agency. She is intricately involved in her own salvation in a way that does not happen in Dracula at all. Or most movies, like even a lot of movies up through the fairly recently, you don't see women having that much agency. And like for that, and that doesn't get talked about. Like I've watched reviews of this movie beforehand and it's not mentioned. And it's like, guys, this is way ahead of its time in terms of that. And no one's talking about it. It's really weird that gets overlooked. But you stack this up to not just Universal monster movies, but the Hammer horror movies, most horror movies through the 90s, and you would be hard pressed to find a female protagonist who, like, even in like those final girl sort of situations, like she is like the sort of final girl decades before final girls were really a thing.
Yeah, for sure. And Zeta Johann does an amazing job in this performance. I've always thought that was one of my favorite characters in these movies out of all of them. Like, not just the Mummy films, but all of the Universal monster movies, man.
Yeah.
Like, I used to have such a crush on her that it actually pissed off one of my ex-girlfriends, as crazy as that sounds. But I was like that into her. And a fun thing about her background is that she was into the occult. She believed in reincarnation. So she really brought it to the role.
Perfect.
And her and the director, Karl Freund, would butt heads very often. And he was trying to like push his authority on her. And she was very willful and not really putting up with it. And they had a contentious relationship, but it doesn't really come across to me in that film because that is a very, very awesome and strong character in a very early horror film. You're right. 100% Joe. Brooks, what do you think about The Mummy?
Well, the Mummy was always my favorite Universal monster. You know, I've always loved like, you know, ancient Egyptian stuff, but you know, and like you know, the Mummy's he's just one of those characters who's like so embedded in pop culture. Like, you know, you just know about him. You know, he's like all the Halloween decorations. It's always the, you know, the guy wrapped up in bandages. And so when you actually watch the first Universal Mummy movie, it's always surprising because like he's never really seen as, you know, he's seen as the wrapped up mummy, but not moving so much, you know. It's just like, you know, you see him in the background for a while. And the rest of the movie, he's just a dude in a fez. But a very creepy dude in a fez, I have to say. And like, I love, you know, that he's a dark wizard, you know. It's just like, it's so crazy. This movie is like a lot more, is probably one of the less horror feeling of the old Universal horror or monster movies. It doesn't feel like a horror movie. It feels like, you know, a romance kind of like it's more like a love story.
It's like a dark fantasy romance, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jelani would love this movie, man. But
I think he does.
Yeah, like I really do like this movie. Like it does have, you know, that old school, like, you know, gee God, let's go over to this foreign country and steal us some artifacts. You know, it has, like, you know, kind of that old timey charm to it, I guess. I don't think it doesn't make it feel like dated. It's just kind of, you know, like a period piece kind of thing.
Yeah, it makes it historical, right? It makes it like a period piece. And I love that it's actually one of the things that it's discussing in this and portraying is the argument of archaeological science, like of going in there, finding the stuff to take it to a museum to make profit from people coming to see it versus just for the sake of science. Like that's like the old school and the new school, the father and the son in the very beginning, you know, like the David Manners. And I can't remember the dude who plays the dad, but man, he's got one of my favorite deliveries because he reads the curse, right? He goes, death, horrible curse or whatever to whoever opens this thing, and he just goes, good Lord, what a terrible curse, and then immediately proceeds to open the motherfucker. I love it. So let's talk about these characters, because I think there's some really great characters and some really strong performances. A lot of the same cast that we've seen in Dracula, and of course Boris Karloff from Frankenstein. But Nick, what's a character you want to highlight?
Well, I mean, obviously Boris Karloff is amazing in this, but we'll just talk about maybe, I don't know, maybe the boyfriend, I guess, for now. What was his name? His name was David Manners, right?
Yeah, David Manners.
David Manners is Frank, right? He played Frank, yeah.
Yeah.
He was an interesting guy because he like fell in love so quickly. Like a lot of these movies, it's like they fall in love and get married in the same week. It feels like this guy was just like head over heels for this girl from the very beginning, and he's constantly trying to like battle this obsession that she has. You know, she's under that spell, right? That Frankenstein
Right, he literally
spell.
just met her. And
yeah, he literally just met her.
Tell me to go to the devil, but you can't laugh at me.
And so many times when she was laying in that like chaise couch or whatever it was, you know, like he's like super close to her, just like staring at her and smiling, and he was just like transfixed. And I think there was a moment where, what was it? The two older guys, one of the doctors or whatever, says like, "Oh no, she's under the curse, and now he is as well." So it's like he's under the curse of like her in some kind of a way, and that love curse or whatever. So I thought his character was really interesting, and how like it was just nonstop trying to rescue her. And then he even had some kind of like, he didn't really buy into everything, you know what I mean? He was told to wear that necklace, right, for protection from the curse, and he didn't buy into it. Man, later in the movie, that came and bit him, right? a little bit. And yeah, and at the very end, he was instrumental on bringing her back into the light in a way, you know. So I thought he was an interesting character. Besides the obvious ones, which I'll leave to more articulated people. So yeah, I thought he was an interesting character. Got a lot of screen time too. So
yeah. So David Manners played a similar type character in Dracula. He played Jonathan Harker, which was a different version of Jonathan Harker than in the Dracula novel. But in this one, what I love is to like is he's there and he's like madly in love with this woman, but he's not the savior. Like he does like help her, and you see like a genuine something there, but like it's not ever like he's like hunting down the mummy. He's like, you know, the dude, he's going out there. It's like he's kind of an idiot throughout most of this movie, right? And I love him. He's great in Dracula. He's great in this. He's really great in The Black Cat, which is one of my favorite Universal horror films. What about you, Joe? What's a performance you want to highlight?
One, I know I kind of already went into, you know, Helen and Oxamoon, but one of the minor characters I think really sells the movie very quick is right in the beginning, the assistant, was it Ralph Norton, who, when the mummy starts to move and leaves, and when he like screams and like loses his mind, like he really sells it. I think that scene works out really great. And is I don't know, it really stuck with me. It really worked. Like just that kind of like mental breakdown he was having seeing that, because what else would you do in a situation like that? Like he just loses his mind, and I think he does it very, very convincingly. And you know, I mean, they kill him off, you know, sort of off screen, but I think that you needed something like that to happen early on to sell the horror aspect of the mummy, and he does it. And I think without that little bit, the movie could have been rockier moving forward. But having that horror and then you carrying it with you is key to the movie. And I think that portrayal and that moment are crucial to making it work.
Ooh, how about how much less impactful would it have been if the mummy came back to life and went and strangled him, and that was it? To your point, him going insane was way more effective than a cheap early kill in the film. So that was an interesting twist. Any other movie, they would just kill the guy. You know, he would just choke him out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it wasn't his intention. Like, he wasn't in the way.
Don't.
Right.
And you
exactly.
And then it just would have been like the hands.
Exactly.
Like,
although that would have been a cool shot. But to your point, I think it's way more impactful that he loses his mind and dies from that over time.
Well, and to that point, too, like Carl, the director, was also the cinematographer for like Metropolis. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Metropolis. And so like that moment of him like going insane, it's like I see that in Metropolis, like those kind of moments. And I think that feels more like that than say like a Dracula.
Yeah, absolutely. His laugh, his scream, it works so freaking well. And I just love his one line when he's like, he decided to go for a little walk. You should have seen his face. Like, so much is implied. And this is a pre-code movie, right? So I saw somebody out there mention, like, when Helen tells Frank, a strange man wants to make love to me, was that meaning courting? No, she meant sex, because they could say stuff like that pre-code. I think the code started in like 35, I think maybe. So a lot of those movies before 35, like Dracula's Daughter, has got some stuff that would have not been allowed to be made after the code was first enforced. But that's a great pick. What about you, Brooks? What's a performance you want to highlight?
Well, I like the I can't remember his name, but the Van Helsing guy, his character,
Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, like he's kind of like the know-it-all professor guy. Like, you know, he's the guy who takes like the whole curse thing seriously. Like, you know, he seems to have like kind of a respect for, you know, the culture, I guess, and that, you know, he like. And, you know, he's just your typical kind of know-it-all professor guy. Just like, you know, he's the guy who you'd want to, you know, have on your side if you had to fight the mummy, because, you know all the stuff.
Yeah, he's played
especially
that role.
considering that this mummy is like a dark wizard too. Like you need a guy who's knowledgeable in these kind
He's
of
in
things.
charge of he's a an expert in Egyptian occult sciences, they call him, right? And Edward Van Sloan is the actor, and he played this character at least 3 times that I can think of off the top of my dome, which is he played Van Helsing, he played the doctor in Frankenstein, not Dr. Frankenstein, but he played the dude that was trying to help him, like his teacher, right?
Yeah.
And of course he plays Mueller here. I love his performance, and he has a scene very much like the scene he has with Bela Lugosi and Dracula, where they're confronting once it's all out and known. I know who you are. You know who I am. They have that very intense scene. When they do that here in The Mummy, I love that. If I could, I would shatter. What he says, something like I would grind your bones to dust or something like that.
Yeah.
Freaking cool scene. Very intense. Edward Van Sloan is awesome. Keeps telling my internet is fuzzy. So if I'm having problems, just let me know. So I'll go ahead and take the obvious one. Then Boris Karloff just kills it here. Boris Karloff just delivers. And so one of my favorite things about the Universal Monster movies is all the way back to when they were first released, like on DVD for the first time. There were like these commentaries and there are these bonus like documentaries that like 6 different like Universal Monster experts kind of come together and like work on, and they do interviews and they do the commentaries. So you get a lot of like background information and they tell you a lot about it. So one of the things they say about this is that Boris Karloff, because of his size, because of his voice, he could very easily come across as overacting, right? So in this movie, he intentionally subdued his performance, moved very little, and spoke very softly. And it adds like a menace and a threat and a perceived hidden power behind this dude that I think works exceptionally well. So let's shift into the style and structure. I think the style is amazing. And what I'm talking about is the way it is shot. Karl Freund, coming from that German expressionism stuff, moving in, like you were talking about, he did Metropolis with Fritz Lang. He did Dracula with Todd Browning. This was his first directorial debut. Most people only have one directorial debut, by the way. But it looks amazing. Like, I love the way this is shot, the stark black and white, the way that it's balanced, right? It's so balanced, and they use the light in really interesting ways, and even at times comedic ways. There's that bit where Imhotep is first trying to awaken Anaximandron, and he's like reading from the scroll. The guard sees him in there with the light. He turns on the light. He just gets up, slowly walks over, turns off the light. The guard goes back, turns on the light. Then he kills him. And it's just like things like that. Like when the dude's grabbing the lamp to read the scroll, and the lighting and the shadows like move, and just the camera movement. Karl Freund was known as a revolutionary cinematographer with the way that he would move the camera. Even as early as that shot in Dracula where he's like moving straight up onto Bela Lugosi's face when he gets out of the coffin, things like that. And then just look at Metropolis. Like this is next level kind of dude as far as like visually telling a story. And I think it just looks absolutely amazing. You can definitely see the influence that Karl Freund has on people like Mike Mignola, for instance, right?
Yeah.
You can totally see that. And then the special effects. Jack Pierce, he did the Frankenstein makeup. He did the Wolfman makeup. He did all those famous monster makeups that we think of. And yeah, we can talk about the extensive process of making Boris Karloff up as the Mummy and how cool that is and how underutilized. This dude's in the makeup chair for like 12, 13, 17 hours and you're barely showing him. That's also restraint, right? That just means that just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it. Right? You can still be subdued even with your special effects when you have amazing stuff, but also just the way he looks, right? Putting the stuff on his skin, stretching it out, making it look super wrinkled, even when he's just in his sorcerer Imhotep kind of mode, freaking looks absolutely stunning. Style and structure is great. The movie, it is the structure of Dracula, but it does different things with it. It's a very tight movie. It's an hour and 13 minutes, man. There's no way anybody can say this movie's too long. Unless it was Terrifier 2. Even if Terrifier 2 was an hour and 13 minutes, it would still feel long to me. I don't know. Nick, what do you think about the style and structure? Why did I use that as an opportunity to get a dig in at Terrifier 2? I love Terrifier 3, by the way, just so y'all know. Anyway, Mummy, style and structure. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I dug that. I talked about the different scenery and things like that already. Story wise, we kind of covered that with the it's just like it's a romance. And I liked, like I said before, I liked how he had his mission, right? He needs to get the proper artifacts. He needs to get the proper people in the right space to like make this whole thing work, and to hell with everybody else in his way. He's just going to do what he needs to do to get it done. And I liked all the obstacles that he had to overcome to get there. He has to get the scroll. It's not over here. It's over there. He has to get the right person, bring her in, things like that, get her away from her people. And so I dug all that. Cinematography wise, there's the scene in the very beginning. Joe kind of alluded to this when we're the assistant's sitting there, and you can see the casket or the sarcophagus right there, and he's just sitting there still. You know, he's dead essentially in this part, and you just know as a viewer, it's like any second now that hand's going to start rising. Like that was a great scene to put them both in the shot right there. I thought that was handled really well. The other part that really stood out to me, of course, was the when they went back and they were telling the story about what he did to get this death for the dead, essentially, right? And when they're wrapping him up, and that they take their time going around his head with that wrapping, and the horror in his eyes increases with every single pass, and eventually it covers the eyes. And it's just like that inevitability of, if you're in that position, that inevitability that he must have felt was just incredible, and the placement of him in there and everything. So I thought that was a scene where they showed a little restraint too, because if that was any longer, it would have been too long. Any shorter, they didn't show you enough or raise your blood pressure enough during that moment. So I thought that was just great. There wasn't a whole, I mean, you know, looking at some of the other monster movies, like there wasn't a whole a bunch of other examples of like real standout moments besides like that mummification, that early scene, like I said, when he first rises, and then maybe you know, some of the confrontations later in the parlor, like you were talking about, when the doctor finally kind of confronted him and everything's out in the open. But yeah, those parts there were especially memorable for sure during that viewing experience. I love that part.
Dude, the flashback sequence, that's like one of my favorite parts of the entire film.
Great.
And I love that it's filmed like a silent film, right? Because even back then, they're aware that we're moving into a different method of filmmaking, right? Like we have sound we can utilize now, we can have music, we can do all these camera movements, we can do things, but they still film that very like a silent film. And I for some reason that always really appeals to me. Like even the jerky movement of everything, I think that even is done pretty intentionally throughout the film. What about you, Joe? What do you think about the style and structure of The Mummy?
No, I think all that's mentioned, of course. It's, I appreciate, you know, kind of building on that point that they wait till so long into the movie, and not that it's a long movie, to do all that exposition.
Yeah.
I think most movies would have, most people who would have tackled this, and the screenwriters get credit for this too, obviously, would have just loaded it all in the beginning. Like we would have seen all that happen as like the first scene in the movie, and that would have been like the prologue, and then the movie would have started. Doing it, structuring it this way, there is more suspense. There is more like it feels more like the kind of structure you get in elevated horror today, of where they kind of like lure you in with like, what is this? What's happening? And over the course of the film, you figure it out. And there's these little hints like when Helen has that whole bit about like, oh, I miss the old Cairo and this and that, the old Egypt. And it's supposed to be, you know, like, oh, we're setting up the fact that she's the reincarnation of Anaxenamon and not, you know, just this modern woman. But yeah, like so it's all it's thought out, it's structured really nicely. So when you go back and watch it, you're like, oh, you know, these things sort of, you know, will set this up. One of the things that didn't make it into the film that I kind of wish did, that adds to it all, is there was supposed to be a sequence of her through different times in her different reincarnations in different costumes, but there's still stills from that have survived that you can see, but it didn't make it into the final version of the movie.
I wish we at least had that footage, right? That would be great.
Yeah.
But that footage apparently is lost now.
Yeah, it would have made the movie like what, an unbearable 80 minutes if they kept that in. Like weird to not put that, especially when you think about the money it must have cost to like do the costuming and all that for multiple sequences of her. But yeah, that's a shame. But I think that would have even elevated it further.
Absolutely. What about you, Brooks? Style, structure? What you thinking?
Well, like this movie is definitely a universal movie. It does have that style, but it's also like very different, you know, like and it does have a lot of parallels with Dracula, and like, but some of those like some of them I think really work. Like I love the scenes where they do the close up of Karloff's face, you know, when the sunken eyes and then the eyes start glowing, and it feels kind of like the scenes in Dracula, you know, where they'd show Lugosi's face with the light across his eyes. So yeah, like, you know, it does. It's definitely a universal monster movie, but you know, it is at the same time it's very different. You know, it feels, you know, like I was saying, it's more like kind of like a romance with like a little bit of horror aspects to it. You know, and I think Karloff, like, oh man, like you really fucking kills it. I think the fact that, you know, he's trying to be more subdued, you know, it's like you said, it does give him that menace, you know. Like he's not the mummy we know. He's not like, you know, the monster wrapped up in the bandage, but he's a different kind of like almost even more threatening kind of menace to him, you know, especially when he's doing like his dark magic and shit. You know?
Yeah.
That's why I love the Mummy though.
Yeah, the Mummy's the fucking shit. All right, let's switch over into the music. The music, there is some original music in the film. It is by James Dietrich. A lot of the music in here though is stock music that you hear also in Frankenstein and some other like Universal monster movies.
Swan Lake, of course.
You hear Swan Lake at the beginning, which was the opening theme of Dracula, the only piece of music in the original Dracula film. But I love that it opens with Swan Lake. Like when we talked about Dracula last year, I mentioned Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake to me, that especially that part of it, right? The big, you know, the part everybody knows, the dun 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 dun. That's always very horrific to me because of its association with Dracula and the Mummy. But the music throughout the film actually works. Like that whole, like the way it builds on itself, like and they use it in every Mummy movie to death in the 1940s. You know, they just keep using that theme, that like thing that Dietrich did. But I love the music. I think it's cool. They didn't quite understand yet in the 30s, especially the early 30s, that we can produce original scores for these films. I think Bride of Frankenstein is one of the first Universal monster movies that has like a complete original score, right? And it works, and it's elevated and excels because of that. So the Mummy could have had more originality there, but I love it as it is. What do you think about the music in the film, Nick?
I mean, it served the purpose, I think. I mean, like you said, I try to go into these older movies, especially with a special ear to the music, just to see if it's really elevating the film. And I think it served its purpose. I think the most interesting thing about the music was the lack of music in the very beginning when the Mummy rises. I think that was, I remember watching it and I'm sitting here like, it's silent. Like, that's an interesting choice. And then the scene kind of drags a little bit and then it ends. And I'm like, there was no music that entire time.
Yeah.
And I guess when I went back and looked it up, and I guess that was a creative choice, and everybody praises him for that. And, you know, I guess rightfully so, because it focuses on that moment and it gives you that eeriness that you need in that moment. Having some kind of instrumental over that would take away from the scene in retrospect. So, but I remember being there and feeling uncomfortable, like in that silence. And I think that was a really interesting choice. So the lack of music in that scene worked even better. Other than that, I can't really remember a score that really stood out. You know what I mean? Maybe it's because a lot of it was stock, like you were saying before, or reused or whatnot. So overall, I thought it just did the job, but I think it was an interesting choice not to include it in certain parts. So
100%. It's got this, the music does have this like really nice, like stepping quality where it's like,
sure.
That's stuff that's like John Williams is going to go massively successful with in Jaws. You know what I'm saying? And it's done here. Like what, 40 years before, right? Like that's insane, right? That's crazy. When you I did the math in my head. Did y'all see that happen? So, but the lack of music, you're right, dude. Because that moment when the Mummy awakens, and think about this, it's not a big like kind of thing, right?
It builds.
He's just like sitting there, and his eye slowly, like so fucking slowly opens in complete silence, right? And what's even crazier is that you hear like the crackle on the audio, right? And I love that. I love that in Dracula. Dracula has like no music in it, right? But we also know that Philip Glass did a score of Dracula back in the 90s. And when you play that score over the movie, I'm always like, man, this moment needs to be silent, right? And that's the same thing with that opening of that Mummy. Now think about this. It's hard for us to put ourselves in 1932 watching this at the theater for the first time. You have there's nothing to like compare this to, right? At the time, right? I think most people, because they say that when the Mummy awakened, it freaked people out. And that's so crazy because it's so subtle. But think about it. When you're watching that scene, I bet you think that's a dummy the entire time back there. So then when all of a sudden you see that eye just slowly open, that's freaking creepy, man. Yeah. Super creepy. Yeah. Joe, what do you think about the music?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's very subtle, very it's used sparingly for the most part. Like you see typically in a lot of these elevated horror films, like these. If you watch an A24 movie, a lot of times it's very little music. There are scenes like in a lot of these Universal monster movies where people are talking and there's nothing, and then it has that like just the background sort of like like raising tension kind of bits. And an A24 horror film would also do something like, ooh, like they're using Swan Lake, but like you don't normally associate that with horror, which sort of like adds a subversion quality to this elevated film. Yeah. So like, it's fun that a lot of these things have been done and they've been done for decades, but people don't want to bother looking back at movies from years ago because it's like, how did people even watch this? And it's like every fucking thing you care about now, people a few decades from now are going to be like, you're a waste of my time. So like why not instead try to embrace the past, present, and future instead of dooming yourself to your own inevitable irrelevancy.
Yeah.
So the music was pretty good.
The music was okay.
In hindsight, going along with that, I think Karl Freund's The Mummy is the movie that awakened my bisexuality back in the day when I was a young kid watching this.
I think so too.
Because almost everybody's hot in this movie. Even Edward Van Sloan's a little hot in this movie. What about you, Brooke? Speaking of hot, creepy old men, what about you? What do you think about the music in the film?
I think it's a pretty standard early Universal soundtrack, but like you guys are saying, like it's kind of how it's used more than the soundtrack itself. It like I think they use they let the moments need to be silent, and they put the soundtrack in where they think the soundtrack will work. I think it's kind of like this is probably one of the earlier movies that would have like a soundtrack. So it's kind of like they're still experimenting probably a little bit with how soundtracks work with movies, and how sound and mood can be like used. So I think it does pretty good though. I mean, like I didn't. There was never a point where I thought the soundtrack was like being overused or anything like that. So yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, it is a crazy concept that they thought, and I know they didn't know where we could go. They didn't have John Williams around yet, but like it's crazy to me that they thought that just the concept and conceit behind the story and the performance and the makeup and the slow way they're filming it and the deliberate cinematography would be enough to scare people, which is crazy. You didn't need a what? You didn't need just a big loud sound to jolt you to make you think that, oh no, they did a really great job with tension in that movie. Did they, or did the composer? Some of these horror films, you got to think about that, right? You really do. Like, was it the music or was it actually what the other techniques were doing? So I don't know.
Oh God! And then like you could also imagine like so many other people doing something where like this, the Mummy's like doing that, and it's just like the and like just being like, this sucks.
Yeah, they did that for 5 Mummy movies after this.
Afterwards,
yeah. Yep. They sure did.
Yeah. So you could definitely see that there. All right. Well, we're the pop culture philosophers. We like to dig a little bit deeper. No pun intended. because I just always say that. But this movie is very appropriate. Let's dig into the Mummy. Nick, what's this movie's theme? What's it saying to you? What's it about?
Man, I mean, there's. Well, I just lost my camera. That's interesting. There's a couple different things probably that's going on there. There's the.
I honestly thought you just dipped out, bro. I thought you were just like, I'm not doing this.
No,
part.
I gotta fix a wire. That thing's way too sensitive. It's a really
I thought
interesting
you pulled a
theme. I
sticky
think the
goose,
theme of
man,
it,
and just dipped out, man. That's what I thought happened.
I mean, there's two major ones. Obviously that like eternal love story is one of the big themes there. And we talked about the other one, which is just like let things be, like quit messing around with forces you don't understand. I think that's, that is the root cause for everything else that happens in here. The eternal love story is great. And I think they handled it really well. But leave things where they lay. I think that's really the biggest theme there, and take things that you don't understand seriously as well, because you're messing with forces you can't comprehend, right? You couldn't possibly comprehend. And we see some people take, don't consider that as much, and we see the outcome of that, and we see people who follow the rules a little bit more, and they can only tell you so many times before you mess up and eventually go too far. So I think those are the two biggest themes there. Just that eternal love story, and don't mess with forces you don't understand.
Good heavens, what a terrible curse.
Indeed, man.
Absolutely. What about you, Joe? What's this movie speaking to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, to sort of, it's true, I am. So the building on what you were saying, Nick, the eternal love story element to it, it's an eternal love story that's entirely one-sided. Like, she's like, oh yeah, I am like the resurrection here.
Right.
And God, like we haven't dated in like a long time. Like,
there's a lot of hot guys around these days,
but like, and maybe part of why they took out seeing her resurrected in these other areas was to kind of try to focus in on that point of like the last time she was really out there was when they were together or something like that. But it's like to have her in this and her very much like being like, no, I don't really want this. And like, it's the reason he wants to be alive again at all, seemingly. So like, it's this really like this like tragic love of like, he's just like, she's just not that into you. Which in all fairness to the ideas of like, oh, this movie is sort of, taking elements of Dracula, elements of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein absolutely lifts from this movie. It does it in a unique and very effective way that is very different, but the core of both of the women in that movie, it's the same bit of like, I'm not here for you. Like, this is not the life I want. And there's also a lot here about, the whether it's intentional or not. Like, it's intentional in the sense of the scientific discovery versus museums and stuff like that being generational. Like, that's intentional, but it's a movie that's like almost 100 years old that's basically saying fuck the British Museum in a way. So like, which is wild when you think about it. Like, this is a movie that is absolutely saying, don't remove artifacts and take them as your own. Like don't take them from people. And I think that's really, again, like, it's a more profound message. It's a more profound and topical message in a very sort of direct way. Like, obviously there are, universal lessons in Frankenstein and Dracula that are relevant to this day, but it's more broad stroke sort of stuff. Whereas this is a message about something that is very timely to this day. So I think that's very interesting that they were able to do something like that almost 100 years ago, and you can watch it today and be like, oh, we're still like talking about that topic.
Yeah, for real. I just got to point out, chill out, man's question, comment here. Because Stu was like, yeah, white people leave stuff alone. Chill out, man's like, no, shout out to all the white nosy people that lost their lives in horror movies. I thank you. If not for you, I wouldn't be here. I love that. I love that. Brooks, what's this movie saying to you, man? What you thinking?
Well, I think this movie, like, it has something to say about, rebellion. And like, I guess one of the things I kind of like about Imhotep, he's kind of a rebel. He's the whole reason, like, he became the mummy is because he rebelled against, the pharaohs. Like, he did something that was, against the rules, because he wanted to do it, because he felt it was right. Like, and when he comes back, he feels like, like he was unjustly punished. And I kind of agree with him, like, that's fucked up to, like, wrap somebody up and bury them alive. I'm not down with that, But at least, through his dark
just
magics,
want everybody to know the PCP officially does not endorse just burying people alive.
Well, now I'm just
Disavow.
picturing that situation and like that happening, and Brooks just standing in the background, just being like, "That's not right."
Yeah, I was
That's
like,
not right what you guys are doing.
Bro, I cannot be a part of this. I'm leaving right now.
I take off my little priest hat and throw it down.
You're like the dude in Exorcist Believer. You're like the dude that's like, nope, can't do it, guys. I'm sorry.
But yeah, it's like, I think like his whole dark wizard aspect is kind of like, kind of stems from that, his rebellious nature, like he's not afraid to, tempt fate and, go a little dark magic, if he thinks he has to get what he wants. And like, it's like, being a rebel, like there's usually a price to it, like not many people get away with like challenging authority, no matter how right or wrong you may be. And that's kind of like the lesson, like, you gotta be careful, when you're fighting the man. Or you might be buried alive.
You guys have all said it, right? Leave stuff alone. Don't go digging for relics. Like if Jelani was here, he'd be like, first of all, I wouldn't be in this movie because I would have just fucking been like, are we digging for some fucking ancient bones and shit? Nope, I'm out of here, right? Also, I do believe Jelani is against burying people alive too. Be like, no,
bold stance, but yeah.
You imagine that scene in Goodfellas in the trunk. They open the trunk, and you're like, you know what, guys? I can't be a part of this. I can't condone this, and so I'm just leaving.
Yeah.
I'm just stepping back. And it is the element of rebellion and the rebellious act of love. Man, that's first of all, love, true love. That's a rebellious act, man. Because sometimes, like I've been in this situation. Maybe y'all have too. Maybe you out there watching have been in this situation where you fall in love with someone falls in love with you, and it's a situation where people are like, oh, this is, and everybody comes at you, right? Like, and they're like, you feel like there's this forbidden love thing. And I think that's a very romantic quality, right? And I think a lot of people get in bad relationships because a lot of people are like, you shouldn't be with this person, red flags, and they just don't pay attention to it, right? And that's what's kind of happening here.
Yeah.
Like Joe was saying, this is a movie that's saying she's just not that into you, bruh. You know what I'm saying? Now, what I would say this movie is about the dangers of obsessive and possessive love, right? Because what Imhotep and Inoxinamun had in the very beginning was true, and it was real, and it was wrong of society to deem that so, right? And it's fucked up to bury people alive because of who they love, right? Like
Apparently.
there's an element, there's a slight element there of it's wrong for a society to attack people because of who they decide or who they choose or who they can't help but love, right?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? But then there's this whole thing of, dude, that time is done, right? How many times have you seen people or us ourselves or partners of ours where you can't let go of the love that was and you're trying to force it to exist even though it's gone, right? That shit was 3,700 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Or it was 20 years ago. or it was 20 months ago. It doesn't matter. Like when it's done, it's done. And it's up to us as people. And people, if you really love your partners and it's no longer there, you got to let it go. You can't stay there. Don't stay on the, don't stalk them. Don't stay on the fucking phone. Don't come back from the dead 3,000 years later to like try to kill them and reincarnate them back into their mummy body. That's what he was wanting to do, by the way. Kill her, reincarnate her in her mummy body. Who would do that? Come on, man. Way more action is going to be had with the current body. Anyway, that was weird. But like, honestly, that's what I think it's about. It's about the dangers of obsessive and possessive love. There was a moment where in this film, it shifts from something genuine and authentic into something possessive and scary. And that was the moment when Helen realized what was up and then dropped down to her knees and prayed to Isis. And Isis luckily was there and took care of it. So that was awesome, right? Very convenient. She's just like, all right, boom. We're just going to blast this motherfucker. But that's what it's about, man. They're like, don't be possessive with your love. Don't be obsessive about it. Let it be genuine. Let it be authentic. And sometimes that authenticity in love means letting something go that has already died. And that's what I think this movie's about. So now it's time to rate the film. You out there in the chat, out of 5 possible you digs, what do you give the 1932 Universal classic, The Mummy? I'll kick us off. 5 you digs. I think it's 5 you digs. I could dock it for being like, well, it's using a lot of the same scenes, a lot of the same structure from Dracula. Oh, it's doing this instead of this. So the mummy's not in there long enough. I don't give a shit about any of that. This movie is chilling. This movie's got themes. This movie looks amazing. The special effects are amazing. The music is really solid. This is one of those first Universal monster movies where they're starting to kind of make that aspect of it work. There are multiple themes. It's ahead of its time. Some would say decades ahead of their time, if not centuries, if not millennia. So to me, it's a 5 you digs. To me, a 5 you digs is this. I was just explaining this to my girlfriend. She asked me to give my criteria for each grade on the 0 to a 5.0 scale, right? And I did it. And I said 5.0 is a movie that I love that I will watch anytime it's on. The Mummy is one of those movies. 5 you digs for me. What about you, Nick? What do you think?
Yeah, that perspective does help because I remember like when we watched Invisible Man, I gave that one a perfect score too because I felt that it did a lot for cinema early on, and it was so many things were developed from there. I'm trying to maybe I'm not a cinema head, so I'm trying to think of like there's obviously things they did in this movie that echoed for decades. I don't know if I want to give it a 5, but I don't know what my brain would have been like in the 30s seeing it for the first time, like from that perspective as well. So I'm just like, man, what do I even give this thing? Man, I'm going to say a 4 or 5. And the only reason I'm going to say a 4 or 5 is because for a movie called The Mummy, there's not a lot of mummy in it. And that might be a stupid perspective to have, but I will say like it did pull a lot of those themes forward, but like, it's not a horror film. I don't really think of this as a horror film. I think of it as a possessive being that has come back to life and does anything he can possibly do to get the love of his life back. And he goes through whoever he needs to, but it wasn't horrific. Maybe that's not the point either, but I'm going to give it a 4 or 5 for those confusing reasons right there about that. And
that's fair. I think that's
fair.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like, unlike the Invisible Man, I hate to make comparisons to Invisible Man, but it's Universal Monsters, so I'm going to. And we talked about Dracula, we talked about Frankenstein, so I think it's fair. There was special effects in that movie, in particular with the invisibleness, right? The bandage wipe. I don't see a lot besides makeup and bandages in this movie from a special effects point of view. I don't think it was as revolutionary as a movie like Invisible Man. And what, that came out a year later, something like that? Wasn't Invisible like
34, I believe.
34, 35, maybe. So I mean, a lot can happen in there, but
that's a different type of that's a different type of special effect too. What Jack Pierce is doing with makeup is different than the optical effects they were doing in Invisible Man.
Fair point.
But just the aging effects alone are like groundbreaking.
Yeah, the layering and things like that and everything. Yeah, you're right. There is some moments there. I think I'm going to stick with the 4 or 5 just because it gives me a little room. I wanted a little bit more, but I can fully appreciate everything it did, the effects it had echoing through the decades after that. So
that's fine. That's fair. That's 4.5 is very fair. I'm just the dude who's like, if it's one of the first of the Universal monster movies, it's a 5. I just don't care.
I mean, there's
Like,
that perspective too. It's like
Yeah,
the influence alone is so powerful.
No,
that-
4.5
why not?
is a very good score. That's a 9 out of 10, bro. That's a
Yeah.
9 out of
Oh,
10
yeah,
for
yeah,
a mummy movie without a mummy. And yeah, you're right.
Right.
That is a dumb way to think about it. Anyway,
Right.
what about you, Joe? What do you think out of
Sure.
5 you
I'm
think?
gonna keep doing the thing I've just, for whatever reason, been doing this night. Be like, I'm gonna build on what Nick said, and I'm, you know, I am going with the 5, but it's, but just to build on some of the stuff where you were getting at some of like where this was influential and what was influential, what was not. I'll take that even further than anything that was just mentioned before, and be like, if this movie was not successful, we might very well not have mummy like Halloween costumes and interest in ancient Egypt that we do in sort of the same way, and coming from it that way. I know there were some movies and different things about like Cleopatra and stuff like that, but like I'm talking, there are so many people that gravitate towards different things and become interested in things through fiction and through horror, like and sparking a kid's imagination. And this movie did that in the same way that Frankenstein and Dracula did, like not just like down to really stupid stuff like Serial and that cartoon Mummy's Alive and things like that. But like it's a thing. You can tell someone like, oh, it's about a mummy, and they know exactly what you're talking about. That's like if you described the way that burials work in like other places or things like that, it's like it doesn't translate the same way. Like you can tell someone off the street like, oh man, I saw this like mummy, and they're like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like that's crazy. And this movie is a huge, if not arguably the only reason this success led to it being so deeply like entrenched in the zeitgeist. So like I have to give it a 5.
So you like, to add on to what you were saying, like, like back then there was the big hysteria over Egyptology because they had found the tomb of King Tut, and there was like treasures galore and the mummy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We don't have that fascination with archaeology anymore, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't had that fascination with archaeology about this kind of stuff for a long time as a civilization or as in the zeitgeist or something, right? But if you ask somebody, if you're doing like word association, right? Like I say something, you just, the first thing that pops up in your head, Egypt, mummy is going to be one of the first things you hear from people, right? That's what you're going to think. And most people, when you ask them about, what do you know about ancient Egypt? They're going to talk about the mummies, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why they think the pyramids were tombs, because all we can think of is mummies, right? Pyramids were not tombs. There's something trickier going on there. We'll dive into that on a later date. Anyway, very respectable scores across the board so far. What about you, Brooks? What do you think?
Well, like when I watched this movie, I thought like, I do love this movie. Like, and under normal circumstances, I'd probably give it a 4.5, but because it has the mummy is my favorite monster, I do have to give it the 5. And despite the fact that as far as the Universal lineup goes, like this movie would be definitely be behind Bride of Frankenstein and Dracula. But still, this is it's still like a classic Universal one, and it's one of the best too. So yeah, like I can't give it less than a 5.
Yeah.
Good conscience.
And another thing is building on what Joe was saying too, and fucking awesome, Brooks. But like, without the success of the mummy, if the mummy was not successful, think about this: Dracula, Frankenstein, the mummy. The mummy didn't work, like, and really like just did not catch on. Do we get Dracula's daughter? Do we get the Invisible Man? Do we get Bride of Frankenstein? It was like a series of movies that built this up, right? And those are some of the best horror films of all time. And I cannot wait to talk about Dracula's daughter on this one. We've done Dracula, we've done Frankenstein, we've done Bride, we've done Invisible Man, we've done The Mummy, we've done Wolfman, we've done Creature. oh my goodness, I think it's time to now start going into the secondary movies. I think Dracula's Daughter might be on board for next Horrorfest, y'all. And that is one of the solidly most underappreciated. That's one of the greatest of Universal monsters. And nobody talks about that, really. Right?
I have seen that on the big screen.
Of course you have. That movie.
I saw this movie in the pyramids. They opened a theater in the pyramids, and I got to watch it. The Pharaoh invited me.
Oh, it was really great.
All right, 5 from me, Brooks, and Joe, a 4.5 from Nick. That's a PCP average of 4.8, 69 dudes. And if you don't think that there was a 69 in this movie, it was in the uncut, or it was in the cut part of the flashback. But don't worry about that, right? Anyway, we love the movie. We definitely recommend it. If you want to watch it, you've never seen it, or if you have watched it and you want to watch it with a little bit more flair, I did do a live commentary to this movie a few years ago when we were doing Mummy Mondays during Horrorfest. So I have a live commentary for Mummy, for Mummy's Hand, Mummy's Tomb, Mummy's Ghost, Mummy's Curse. Didn't make it to the Abbott and Costello one, but I have a live commentary for those. So if you want to feel like you're watching the movie with me, go check those out on Pop Culture Philosophers. Just type it in. All right. Thus concludes our movie review of 1932's The Mummy. But even though we're at the end of Horrorfest, we still got a lot of shows to come. Tonight at 9:30 Central Time, so just like less than an hour and a half away, I'll be over at Dylan's Horror Show talking about Dead Alive by Peter Jackson. Super excited for that. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central Time, the Exorcist franchise. We have subjected ourselves to 6 Exorcist films just so that we can talk about them with you. And I'm going to tell you, this franchise is not as bad overall as I think some people would claim that it is. And then on Wednesday, you can check us out over at Blood Splatter Chatter for his big finale, where he's talking about the X, Pearl, and Maxine Ty West trilogy. And then Halloween night, join us here on Halloween night as we wrap up Horrorfest with Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Nick, thank you so much for being here. Final thoughts? What you got coming up?
This was an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to do some more with you guys next season. So thank you again for bringing me on. Just regular videos coming out Wednesdays and Saturday nights, but we're dipping into the interview space as well. So me and Eric and Stu most recently have been putting together a bunch of new interviews. We did Sam Royale recently. He's a really, really great guy. Jim Zub as well. We did Marty, Keen. We did so many guys. So if you're into that kind of stuff, if you're waiting for us to dip into that space a little bit more, you can check out our channels and see more of that great stuff right there. But dude, thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. Thank you for being on, man. We want you on more of these Horrorfest reviews, especially, man. We're easing you in with Invisible Man and The Mummy, but we're gonna wind up getting you on something stupid like Days of Thunder one day. You just wait and see. And chill out, man. Brad Dourif is in Exorcist 3, which is one of the greatest psychological thrillers of the 90s. Joe, thank you so much for being here. Exorcist 3 is amazing. It's so good to rewatch it. It's so fucking good. Anyway, what's coming up for you, man? Thank you for being here. Final thoughts.
Hey, no, thank you for having me. There's let's see, a bunch of still like buy the rest of Robbie's copies of Kardak the Mystic. I don't want him having any more. Get them, get rid of them. Get them gone. DM them.
We do have some more copies, yeah.
But like, get rid of those. Sell them. Come on, hit up Robbie. I'm sure if you throw a lot of money at Robbie, you can get one. So. Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. Why not? So
it's a great issue too. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. I feel like what was it? So you could also still get King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, Volume 1. That's out. I'm really proud of that. That's my first YA graphic novel based on the 90s cartoon. And then I'm editing Green Hornet coming up. And that's most of it. I should be at GalaxyCon Columbus. I still got to book my flight, but you should be able to see me there. And I have other stuff I don't think I can talk about yet, but hopefully soon. So yeah.
As soon as Joe can talk about it, we'll talk about it 100%. And you know that. Brooks, thank you so much for being here. Jelani wanted me to point this out. I'm going to drop this in the chat. So you guys are doing a 500 giveaway, 500 subscriber giveaway over on Go Figure Reviews. And he wanted me to say some stuff. But as I do that, why don't you give us your final thoughts and tell us a little bit about your channel?
Yeah, well, me and Dwayne do Go Figure Reviews. He was too cowardly to show his face tonight. He was too scared of the mummy's curse.
Did you bury his ass alive? Is that what happened?
Is he dead alive?
But yeah, we've the last video we did a live stream actually with Mark Spears, where we asked him a few questions. We talked to him a little bit, had a little bit of a gab fest. It was a lot of fun, and we did like it was a Halloween special. We did a top 5 like kind of Halloweeny themed figures. It's a lot of fun, and we haven't done anything yet for this week, but I think the plans are to probably do the Marvel Legends Odin and possibly Bloodstorm from the Strange Tales set. So we'll see. That's just the last I heard, that was the plan, but
Heck yeah.
should be coming up pretty soon.
So the link I just threw up, the rules are you must be subscribed to the channel. You must comment with hashtag Ferret500 on the channel, and 30 comments must be present on the video to qualify. I don't know. That's weird. All right, go ahead, go to that video and just listen to the rules there and do your hashtag. It's a great G.I. Joe toy that you have no excuse not to just go and
G.I. Joe classified stuff has been really, really cool, even though I don't collect
really
it.
cool. And like shit like the Ferret's way too expensive. So like go and even if you don't want it, if you win it, send it to me. Send it to my ass. That'd be great. Because I don't think I'm allowed
if it
to
just ends up in your office.
Yeah, it's just back there. It's like, yeah, someone else won this, and this is there you go. So to remind everybody, Horrorfest is wrapping up, but it's going to be a fantastic wrap up tonight, 9:30 p.m. Central Time, Dylan's Horror Show. I'll be talking about Dead Alive with Dylan and the crew. Tomorrow night, we'll be talking about the entire Exorcist franchise here on PCP. I'll be over at Blood Splatter Chatter on Wednesday night talking about the X trilogy. And then Halloween night, we end it here with Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And then right after that, on Friday night, is the monthly comic book review, the award-winning monthly comic book review. And speaking of award-winning, Saturday night are the CBC Awards. So everybody tune in, and hopefully we can take home some awards for the PCP crew and the Bad Batch and everybody else. Nick, I hope you win. I hope I win. Brooks, I hope y'all win. Fable, Two Gun, I hope y'all win. I hope everybody wins. I just want everybody to win. But more importantly, me. So let's see what happens Saturday night. It's going to be a busy week, but that's the way we do it here at Horrorfest time. We are dipping out, and heck yeah, y'all. Horrorfest has been great. Thank you for making it the biggest, bloodiest, most transgressive Horrorfest lineup of all time. Thank you all so much. And my final thought will be, I was trying to think of a quote from The Mummy, but I couldn't. How about this one? Don't bury me. We're not cool with burying people alive.
It's true.
We're against that.